So today what we're going to do is we're going to review completing the square. So if you remember, there are 3 steps that we have for completing the square. Okay? Actually, there was a step first. The first step we need to do is we need to make sure that x squared is 1, and we'll talk about that later. But we need to move all terms involving x to one side of the equation, everything else to the other side. And you should already have this written down somewhere. You needed second step, take half of the x term, square it, and then add to both sides. And then step 3, rewrite the side involving x, and then we solve the equation. Now when we complete the square, sometimes we will get whole numbers. Sometimes we will get numbers with square roots, and sometimes we will get numbers with I. So let's go ahead and start looking at our first one. X squared minus 3x minus 18. So if you remember, the first step we need to do is make sure that x squared is 1. So it's a 1x squared. And sure enough, I have a 1x squared here. Okay. So I'm good. So now this next step, move everything with an x to one side. So I'm going to go ahead and leave x squared minus 3x on the left side. And I'm going to move the 18 to the right side. So remember, we're going to go ahead and move that 18, so we're going to use the opposite when we move it. And remember, we leave a space because we're going to put something in that space. Next step is to take half of the x term. So half of negative 3. Yeah, half of negative 3, I'm going to write it as negative 3 over 2. I'm going to square it, and it's going to go on both sides. So really, what is negative 3 halves squared? What is negative 3 squared? 9. What is 2 squared? 4. So really, that's 9/4. So do we remember how we write the left side?
X
Yep.
plus 3 halves squared.
X plus negative 3 halves quantity squared. Remember how that comes from? Here's an x, and here's my negative 3 halves. I always take the first term squared and the last term squared. Remember, the middle term doesn't drop out. What we're doing is factoring. So now what I need to do is add 18 and 9/4 together. I need my answer as an improper fraction. And what does that come out to be? 18 plus 9/4, improper fraction. What'd you get? 81? Did you say 81?
81 over 4.
Yep. Or was it 80 over 4? Was it 81 over 4? Okay. 81 over 4. So now what I need to do is solve that. So do you remember what our next step is? Square root. What's the important thing whenever I take the square root? Plus or minus. Very good. So on the left side, what ends up happening is those cancel, and it leaves me with x plus negative 3 halves. On the right side, I have plus or minus the square root of 81, which is what? 9 over the square root of 4, which is 2. What's my next step going to be to do?
Plus 3 halves.
Add 3 halves. Whenever I do the addition of a number here, I always put that number in front of the plus or minus. So 3 halves plus or minus 9 halves. So how many solutions will I have here? 2. The first solution is going to be 3 halves plus 9 halves. The next solution will be 3 halves minus 9 halves. So what will 3 halves plus 9 halves be? 12 over 2, which is 6. What's 3 halves minus 9 halves going to be? Negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. So those are your 2 solutions. Okay? Questions? All right, let's look at another one. Here we go. So first step, we make sure that x squared is 1, which it is. What am I going to do on my next one? Yep, subtract 25. Very good. So I end up getting x squared minus 6x equals negative 25.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the minus 6x, it doesn't make the 6 negative.
The 6 is negative.
So when we take half of the x,
Which is what in this case?
3.
Okay,
is it
it'll
gonna
be negative 3. It'll be negative 3. But the thing is, when you square it on the right side, whenever you square a negative, it becomes a positive.
So it'd just be easier to write.
You could put plus 9 on the right side.
Okay.
Okay, you don't have to put, if you wanted to, you could just go right here and say, oh, well, that's 9, so I'm going to add 9. The reason why we leave it written as negative 3 squared is because then on this left side, now when we write it as a quantity, it's easier to see what number you put last. Okay, so here I get x, and here I get negative 3. On the right side, since we've already changed that to a 9, what do we get? Negative 16. Now this one isn't like the other one. What do you do now? Square root. So on the left, you're left with x minus 3. On the right, plus or minus? Close. 4i. Very good. Because remember that negative, whenever we have a negative inside, we always get rid of it by using an I. So really this comes out to be plus or minus root 16i, and we know that the square root of 16 is 4. Last step will be to add 3. So my answer is 3 plus or minus 4i.
So you can't do anything.
Nope, can't do anything more, you're done. All right, I think I've got one more to look at. And then I'm going to let you go on your worksheet. So what are we going to do first? Divide by 2, good. So divide by 2. So I end up getting x squared minus 7 halves x plus 5 halves equals 0. Now what do I need to do? Yep, subtract 5 halves. So I end up getting x squared minus 7 halves x equals negative 5 halves. So now I take half of negative 7 halves. Easy way to do this, just multiply your denominator by 2. So if I multiply the denominator by 2, what do I get as a fraction? Negative 7/4. That's the easy way. Whenever you have a fraction like that, multiply that denominator by 2. That's taking it times 1/2. So on the right side, it's going to be negative 7/4 squared. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and square it now. What's negative 7 quantity squared? 49. What's 4 squared? 16. So you could go ahead and do that if you wanted. Okay, that's kind of one of those things that can save you some time. What goes inside the parentheses? X minus 7/4. Very good. On the right side, I need to add negative 5 halves and 49/16. So actually, this would be negative 40/16 plus 49/16, which is 9/16. Now I need to take the square root, plus or minus. So on the left, I get x minus 7/4. On the right, I get plus or minus what? 3/4. Good. Final step will be to add 7/4 to both sides. So if I add 7/4 to the left and to the right, I end up getting x equals 7/4 plus or minus 3/4. So my first answer, 7/4 plus 3/4 is what? 10/4, which I know is 5 halves. My next answer will be 7/4 minus 3/4, which is 4/4, which is 1. All right, so that's kind of a review. What I've got is I've got a 10-question worksheet for you that'll be due tomorrow. You have the rest of the time to work.